Hello there, and welcome back to this quiet corner where time moves slowly and curiosity meets calm. I'm so grateful you found your way here tonight, ready to journey backward through the vast corridors of time, through millions and billions of years, to when our Earth was young and strange and utterly different from the world we know today. Wherever you are right now, whatever time it is in your part of the world, I want you to take a moment to settle in. Let your shoulders drop. Let your breathing deepen and slow. Tonight, we're going to explore the deep past, the ancient Earth that existed long before humans, before mammals, before dinosaurs even. We're going to walk through forests that predate flowers, swim in seas filled with creatures that have no living descendants, and witness continents drifting across the globe like slow-motion ships. The story of ancient Earth is not a story of violence and chaos, though there were certainly dramatic moments. It's primarily a story of patience, of slow change, of life adapting and experimenting and finding ways to thrive in environments we can barely imagine. It's a story that unfolds over timescales so vast they make human history seem like a fleeting breath. And there's something deeply calming about that perspective, about understanding our place in this immense timeline, about recognizing that the Earth has been here for so long and has weathered so much. If you find these explorations helpful, if they bring you peace or spark your curiosity, consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. It helps others find their way here too, one curious soul at a time. But for now, just get comfortable. Close your eyes if you'd like, or let them rest softly. We have hours ahead of us, and there's no rush. Time, after all, is something we have in abundance tonight. Let's begin our journey into the deep past. Earth is about 4.6 billion years old, an age so vast it challenges our comprehension. When we try to imagine 4.6 billion years, our minds struggle to grasp the scale. If we compressed Earth's entire history into a single 24-hour day, humans would appear only in the last few seconds before midnight. Written human history would occupy less than the final second. To truly understand our planet's story, we need to think in geological time, where a million years is a brief moment and continents move at the speed fingernails grow. The Earth formed from a swirling disk of gas and dust orbiting our young sun, particles colliding and sticking together, growing larger through accretion until they formed a molten sphere of rock and metal. This early Earth was nothing like the blue and green world we know today. It was a hellish place, bombarded constantly by asteroids and comets, its surface covered in magma oceans that glowed red-hot beneath a toxic atmosphere. There was no oxygen to breathe, no water on the surface, no life of any kind. Just rock and heat and the slow cooling of a newborn planet. Yet even in this hostile beginning, the seeds of everything we know today were being planted. The moon formed from a catastrophic collision early in Earth's history. About 4.5 billion years ago, when Earth was only about 100 million years old, a Mars-sized object that scientists call Theia crashed into our young planet. The impact was so violent that it vaporized both Theia and a large portion of Earth's outer layers, sending enormous amounts of debris spiraling into orbit. This debris gradually coalesced under its own gravity to form the moon. The collision likely remelted Earth's entire surface, resetting the geological clock and mixing materials deep within the planet. The moon that formed from this cosmic catastrophe was much closer to Earth than it is today, appearing perhaps 10 to 20 times larger in the sky. Its proximity meant stronger tides and faster rotation for Earth, with days lasting only about 5 hours. The moon has been slowly drifting away from Earth ever since, currently receding at about 1.5 inches per year, a process that will continue for billions of years. This ancient collision fundamentally shaped our planet, affecting everything from Earth's rotation and axial tilt to the eventual development of life. Without the moon, Earth would be a very different place with different tides, different seasons, and possibly no complex life at all. Early Earth had no oxygen in its atmosphere. For the first half of our planet's history, approximately 2 billion years, the atmosphere contained virtually no free oxygen. Instead, it was composed primarily of nitrogen, carbon dioxide, methane, and water vapor, along with traces of ammonia, hydrogen sulfide, and other gases that would be toxic to most modern life. This reducing atmosphere was perfect for the chemistry that may have given rise to the first living organisms, as oxygen tends to break apart the complex organic molecules necessary for life. The early ocean, fed by countless comets and asteroids delivering water to the young planet, was likely warm and rich in dissolved minerals and organic compounds. Lightning, ultraviolet radiation from the sun, and volcanic activity provided energy for chemical reactions that could build increasingly complex molecules. In this oxygen-free world, the sky would have had a different color, perhaps more orange or hazy, rather than the blue we're familiar with. The landscape would have been barren rock, with no plants, no soil, just stone and water, and the slow work of weathering. It's difficult for us to imagine a world without oxygen, as we depend on it for every breath. But for billions of years, oxygen was essentially poison, and life existed without it, even thrived without it. In ways that seem alien to us now, life emerged surprisingly early in Earth's history. Despite the hostile conditions on early Earth, life appeared relatively quickly in geological terms. The oldest evidence for life dates back to about 3.8 to 4.1 billion years ago, less than a billion years after the planet formed and shortly after the late heavy bombardment, a period when the inner solar system was pummeled by asteroids and comets. These first organisms were simple, single-celled microbes, probably similar to modern bacteria. They didn't need oxygen and likely obtained energy from chemical reactions, perhaps around hydrothermal vents in the deep ocean, where hot, mineral-rich water gushed from the seafloor, much like the vents we explored in our ocean journey. These early microbes were the pioneers, the first experimenters in the art of staying alive on an inhospitable planet. They developed ways to harvest energy from their environment, to grow and reproduce, to pass information from one generation to the next through primitive forms of DNA or RNA. For more than 1 billion years, these microorganisms were the only life on Earth invisible to the naked eye, yet fundamentally transforming the planet through their collective metabolic activities. They colonized every available niche, from shallow pools warmed by the sun to deep rocks kilometers beneath the surface, from freezing waters near the poles to scalding hot springs. Life, once it began, proved remarkably tenacious and adaptable. Stromatolites are some of the oldest evidence of life. If you visit certain beaches today, particularly in Western Australia's Shark Bay, you'll find odd, rounded rock formations rising from shallow water. These are stromatolites, layered structures built by communities of microorganisms, particularly cyanobacteria, that trap sediment and precipitate minerals as they grow. Stromatolites have an ancient pedigree. Fossil stromatolites have been found in rocks dating back 3.5 billion years, making them among the oldest evidence of life on Earth. For billions of years, stromatolites were the dominant visible feature of Earth's shallow seas, covering vast areas of coastline in lumpy cabbage-like mounds. The microorganisms that build stromatolites live in thin films on the surface, growing toward the light and periodically getting buried by sediment or mineral precipitation. Over time, this creates the distinctive layered structure that can be preserved in rock. Looking at a stromatolite is like looking at a time machine, a living connection to the deep past when these structures were far more common than they are today. The cyanobacteria that build stromatolites were also responsible for one of the most important events in Earth's history, an event we'll explore next. They may seem unremarkable, these rocky lumps in shallow water, but they represent billions of years of continuous biological activity, a testament to life's persistence and to the slow, patient ways that simple organisms can reshape an entire planet. Cyanobacteria created the oxygen we breathe. About 2.4 billion years ago, something remarkable happened. Cyanobacteria, simple photosynthetic microorganisms living in Earth's oceans, began producing oxygen as a waste product of photosynthesis. At first, this oxygen didn't accumulate in the atmosphere because it reacted with dissolved iron in the ocean, forming iron oxide that precipitated to the seafloor in enormous quantities. These ancient iron deposits, called banded iron formations, are among the most striking features in the geological record. Alternating layers of iron-rich and iron-poor rock that formed over millions of years as oxygen production waxed and waned. Eventually, after hundreds of millions of years, the ocean's dissolved iron was exhausted and oxygen began to accumulate in the atmosphere. This event, called the Great Oxidation Event, fundamentally transformed our planet. For organisms that had evolved in an oxygen-free world, this was a catastrophe. Oxygen is highly reactive and toxic to many forms of life that lack protective mechanisms. The Great Oxidation Event may have caused a mass extinction of anaerobic organisms, though the microscopic nature of life at that time means we have little direct evidence. But this crisis also created opportunities. Oxygen-breathing organisms could extract far more energy from food than their anaerobic cousins, enabling more complex metabolisms and eventually more complex life forms. The oxygen atmosphere also led to the formation of the ozone layer, which shields the surface from harmful ultraviolet radiation, making land habitable. Everything that followed, all the complex life we see around us today, depends on this ancient revolution carried out by microscopic bacteria that simply photosynthesized, died and photosynthesized again, generation after generation, slowly filling the sky with a gas that would enable consciousness itself. Billions of years later, Earth once froze completely in snowball Earth events. Several times in Earth's history, the planet experienced extreme ice ages when ice spread from the poles toward the equator, possibly covering the entire planet in a frozen shell. These snowball Earth events occurred primarily between 720 and 635 million years ago, though there may have been earlier episodes as well. During these frozen periods, ice sheets kilometers thick may have covered even the oceans near the equator, and global temperatures plummeted far below anything we experience today. How could life survive such extreme conditions? It's likely that not all the oceans froze solid. Volcanic heat and geothermal activity may have kept some areas ice-free, creating refugia where life could persist. There may also have been cracks and openings in the ice where sunlight penetrated and photosynthetic organisms could survive. The snowball Earth periods eventually ended when volcanic activity pumped enough carbon dioxide into the atmosphere to create a super greenhouse effect, melting the ice in a geologically rapid warming. These freeze-thaw cycles may have acted as evolutionary pressure cookers, eliminating many species but allowing those that survived to diversify rapidly in the aftermath. Some scientists think the stress of snowball Earth conditions may have spurred the evolution of more complex multicellular life. The idea that Earth could freeze solid seems almost incomprehensible, a planet-sized ice ball spinning through space, yet geological evidence strongly supports at least two and possibly more such episodes. It's a reminder that Earth's climate can reach extremes we can barely imagine, and that life's persistence through such conditions speaks to its remarkable resilience. Continents have been drifting for billions of years. The solid ground beneath our feet seems permanent and unchanging, but on geological timescales, continents are constantly moving, drifting across Earth's surface at speeds of a few centimeters per year. This process, called plate tectonics, has been operating for at least 3 billion years and probably longer. Earth's outer shell is divided into large plates that float on the hotter, more fluid mantle below. These plates move because of convection currents in the mantle, driven by heat from Earth's core and from radioactive decay of elements in the rock. Where plates collide, mountain ranges rise, and one plate may slide beneath another in a subduction zone. Where plates pull apart, new crust forms and oceans widen. This constant motion means that the map of Earth's surface has changed dramatically over time. Continents that are now separated by vast oceans were once joined together. Mountains that seem eternal are relatively recent features and will eventually erode away. The Atlantic Ocean didn't exist for most of Earth's history. It began opening only about 200 million years ago. India was once separated from Asia by an ocean. When the two landmasses collided, the Himalayas were born. Understanding plate tectonics revolutionized geology in the 1960s, providing a unifying theory that explained everything from earthquakes to the distribution of fossils to the locations of volcanoes. But more than that, it reveals Earth as a dynamic, constantly changing planet where even the continents themselves are temporary arrangements, gathering together and breaking apart in cycles that last hundreds of millions of years. Supercontinents have formed and broken apart multiple times. Throughout Earth's history, the drifting continents have periodically collided to form supercontinents, massive landmasses where most or all of Earth's continental crust is joined together. The most recent supercontinent, Pangaea, existed between about 335 and 175 million years ago, during the late Paleozoic and early Mesozoic eras. At its maximum extent, Pangaea stretched from pole to pole, surrounded by a single vast ocean called Panthalassa. The interior of Pangaea was dry and desert-like, too far from the ocean for moist air to reach, with extreme seasonal temperature variations. But Pangaea was just the most recent in a long series of supercontinents. Before Pangaea, there was Pannotia, which formed around 600 million years ago and broke apart about 540 million years ago. Before that was Rodinia, which assembled around 1.1 billion years ago and fragmented around 750 million years ago. And before Rodinia, there were others, their names less certain, and their configurations reconstructed from fragmentary evidence in ancient rocks. Each supercontinent follows a cycle: assembly when continents drift together, maximum extent when they're fully joined, and breakup when rifting begins and new oceans open. The entire cycle takes about 400 to 500 million years, a pattern called the supercontinent cycle. This cycle has profound effects on climate, ocean circulation, evolution, and the distribution of resources. When continents are joined, land animals can migrate across vast distances, mixing populations. When they break apart, populations become isolated and can evolve independently. The formation and breakup of supercontinents is one of the grand rhythms of Earth's history, a slow pulse that has been beating for billions of years. The Precambrian represents most of Earth's history. When we think about Earth's past, we often focus on dinosaurs or early mammals or the first humans. But these events all occurred in the Phanerozoic eon, the most recent eon of Earth's history, which began only 541 million years ago. Before the Phanerozoic lies the Precambrian, a vast stretch of time encompassing nearly 90% of Earth's entire history, from the planet's formation 4.6 billion years ago to 541 million years ago. The Precambrian is divided into several eons: the Hadean, from Earth's formation to about 4 billion years ago when the planet was hellishly hot; the Archean, from 4 billion to 2.5 billion years ago when life first appeared and began transforming the atmosphere; and the Proterozoic, from 2.5 billion to 541 million years ago, which saw the rise of oxygen, the snowball Earth events, and eventually the first complex multicellular life. For most of the Precambrian, life was microscopic. There were no animals, no plants, no fungi, just bacteria and archaea, and eventually simple eukaryotic cells. Yet this was hardly a boring time. The Precambrian saw the origin of life, the invention of photosynthesis, the oxygenation of the atmosphere, the evolution of sexual reproduction, the first multicellular organisms, and countless other innovations that laid the groundwork for everything that followed. The Precambrian's rocks are often heavily metamorphosed and eroded, making them difficult to study, and fossils are rare because most organisms lacked hard parts that fossilize easily. But what we can learn from these ancient rocks tells a story of a planet slowly being shaped by life, preparing the stage for the explosion of diversity that would come later. Complex life appeared suddenly in the Cambrian explosion. For more than 3 billion years, life remained microscopic or at most formed simple films and mats. Then, beginning around 541 million years ago at the start of the Cambrian period, something extraordinary happened. In a geological blink of an eye, a span of perhaps 10 to 20 million years, nearly all the major groups of animals appeared in the fossil record. This event, called the Cambrian explosion, saw the emergence of creatures with hard shells, complex body plans, eyes, legs, predatory behaviors, and defensive armor. Trilobites scuttled across the seafloor, bizarre animals like Anomalocaris hunted with grasping appendages, and the ancestors of modern arthropods, mollusks, and vertebrates all made their first appearances. The Cambrian seas were suddenly full of life in a diversity of forms that would look alien to modern eyes, but contained the basic body plans that would persist through all subsequent eras. What caused this explosion of diversity? Several factors probably contributed. The rise of oxygen levels made more active lifestyles possible. The evolution of predation created an arms race of offensive and defensive adaptations. Genetic innovations, particularly in the genes that control body development, allowed for more complex and varied forms. The breakup of the supercontinent Pannotia created new coastlines and shallow seas, providing abundant habitat. Whatever the exact causes, the Cambrian explosion marks the beginning of the world as we recognize it, the start of an era when fossils became abundant and life's history easier to read in stone. Trilobites dominated the Paleozoic oceans for 270 million years. Among the most successful and iconic of all Paleozoic animals were the trilobites, arthropods with segmented bodies divided into 3 lobes along their length. Trilobites first appeared in the Cambrian and diversified into thousands of species that filled ecological roles from scavengers to predators to filter feeders. Some trilobites were tiny, just a few millimeters long, while others grew to nearly a meter in length. They had compound eyes, often with thousands of lenses giving them excellent vision. Some species could roll up into a ball for defense, like modern pillbugs. Trilobites lived in every marine environment from shallow reefs to the deep sea, and their fossils are found on every continent. For paleontologists, trilobites are invaluable. Because they were so diverse and evolved relatively quickly, different trilobite species characterize different time periods, helping scientists date rocks and correlate layers across vast distances. Trilobites survived several mass extinctions, recovering each time and continuing to diversify, but they couldn't survive the Permian-Triassic extinction 252 million years ago, the worst mass extinction in Earth's history. After 270 million years of success, trilobites vanished forever, leaving behind only their fossils as testimony to their former dominance. There's something poignant about the trilobites' story, these creatures that were so successful for so long, yet ultimately couldn't adapt to changing conditions. They remind us that no matter how well adapted a species is, circumstances can change, and what once thrived can become extinct. Life colonized land about 470 million years ago. For the first 4 billion years of Earth's history, land was essentially barren. There may have been microbial mats in damp areas and perhaps some simple organisms in moist soil, but terrestrial ecosystems, as we know them, didn't exist. The first organisms to successfully colonize land were probably similar to modern mosses and liverworts, simple plants that stayed low to the ground and required moist conditions. These pioneers were followed by more complex plants that developed specialized tissues for transporting water and nutrients, allowing them to grow taller and venture into drier environments. The first land plants transformed the landscape. Their roots helped break down rock, creating the first true soils. Their bodies provided food and habitat for other organisms. Dead plant material accumulated, forming the first terrestrial organic matter. As plants spread, they began to affect the atmosphere, drawing down carbon dioxide through photosynthesis and contributing oxygen. The colonization of land also presented challenges. Plants had to deal with desiccation, support their own weight without the buoyancy of water, reproduce without water to carry sperm to eggs, and protect themselves from ultraviolet radiation. The solutions to these problems, including waxy cuticles, structural tissues like lignin, seeds, and pigments that absorb UV light, represent some of evolution's most important innovations. By about 400 million years ago, the first forests were growing, dominated by primitive trees and creating ecosystems that would eventually attract the first land animals. Arthropods were among the first animals on land. Following the plants onto land came the arthropods, animals with jointed legs and external skeletons, ancestors of modern insects, spiders, and millipedes. Early land arthropods appeared in the Silurian period, around 400 to 30 million years ago, and by the Carboniferous period, 360 to 300 million years ago, they had diversified into forms both familiar and bizarre. Millipedes and centipedes scuttled through the leaf litter. Primitive insects took flight, becoming the first animals to achieve powered flight. Some arthropods grew to enormous sizes in the oxygen-rich atmosphere of the Carboniferous. Giant millipedes reached lengths of over 2 meters, dragonfly relatives had wingspans of 70 centimeters, and massive scorpion-like creatures prowled the swamps. These giants were possible because arthropods breathed through a network of tubes called tracheae that deliver oxygen directly to tissues. In a high-oxygen atmosphere, these tubes could be more efficient, supporting larger body sizes. The arthropod's success on land paved the way for vertebrates. They processed plant material, creating nutrient-rich detritus. They served as prey for the first land vertebrates. They pollinated plants, helping drive the evolution of flowering plants millions of years later. Today, arthropods remain the most diverse group of animals on land, with insects alone comprising more than half of all described species. Their conquest of land represents one of life's great success stories. The first forests were strange and alien. By the Devonian period, about 385 million years ago, substantial forests covered much of the land. But these were not forests as we would recognize them. The dominant trees were bizarre organisms that bear little resemblance to modern plants. Archaeopteris, one of the first true trees, had a woody trunk but reproduced with spores like a fern. Lepidodendron, or scale trees, were giant club mosses that could reach heights of 40 meters, with trunks covered in diamond-shaped scars where leaves had fallen off. Sigillaria were similar, but had vertical rows of leaf scars instead of the diagonal pattern of lepidodendron. These plants reproduced with spores, not seeds, and required moist conditions. Some forests of the time included prototaxites, mysterious organisms that looked like giant columns of rolled felt, reaching heights of 8 meters. For years, scientists debated what prototaxites was, a plant, a lichen, a fungus? Current evidence suggests it was indeed a fungus, making it by far the largest fungus that has ever existed. Walking through a Devonian forest would be a surreal experience. The trees would look wrong, their bark patterns unfamiliar, their reproductive structures alien. There would be no flowers, no grass, no birds singing, though perhaps the buzzing of primitive insects. The air would be thick and humid, rich in oxygen. These forests were transitional, representing life's first experiments with large-scale terrestrial ecosystems, pioneering strategies and structures that would be refined over millions of years into the diverse forests we know today. Vertebrates evolved from fish in the Devonian. While plants and arthropods were colonizing land, vertebrates were still confined to water. But in the Devonian period, often called the Age of Fishes, a group of lobe-finned fish began developing features that would eventually allow their descendants to live on land. These fish had muscular, fleshy fins supported by bones, rather than the ray fins of most modern fish. They also had primitive lungs, which likely evolved initially as a supplement to gills in oxygen-poor water. Some of these fish, living in shallow swamps and streams that frequently dried up, may have used their sturdy fins to pull themselves from pond to pond, a behavior that would favor stronger limbs and more efficient air breathing. Over millions of years, these fish evolved into the first tetrapods, four-legged vertebrates. Early tetrapods like Acanthostega and Ichthyostega retained many fish-like features, including gills and a tail fin, but they had recognizable legs with digits. They probably spent most of their time in water, but could venture onto land, perhaps to escape predators, reach new pools, or lay eggs. The transition from fish to tetrapod is one of the most important transitions in vertebrate evolution, and also one of the best documented in the fossil record. Recent discoveries have filled in many of the gaps, showing us intermediate forms and revealing that the move to land was gradual, with many experiments and dead ends along the way. The Carboniferous period was the age of giant insects and early forests. From about 360 to 300 million years ago during the Carboniferous period, Earth's climate was warm and humid, and vast swamp forests covered much of the land. These forests were dominated by giant club mosses, horsetails, and early seed plants growing in dense stands that accumulated deep layers of peat when they died. Over millions of years, this peat was buried and compressed, eventually forming most of the world's major coal deposits, which is why this period is called the Carboniferous, coal-bearing. The atmosphere during this time contained about 35% oxygen, compared to 21% today. This oxygen-rich environment allowed arthropods to grow to enormous sizes. Dragonfly relatives with 70-centimeter wingspans patrolled the skies. Millipedes, over 2 meters long, crawled through the undergrowth. Scorpions and spiders grew large and fearsome. The first reptiles appeared in the Carboniferous, small lizard-like creatures that laid eggs with waterproof shells, freeing them from dependence on water for reproduction. This was a crucial innovation that would eventually allow vertebrates to colonize even the driest environments. Walking through a Carboniferous swamp would be an overwhelming sensory experience. The air thick and humid, buzzing with giant insects, the ground squelching underfoot. The trees rising high overhead, their spore-bearing structures hanging like strange fruit. It was a world of giants, both plants and animals, made possible by atmospheric conditions that would never be repeated. Oxygen levels have fluctuated dramatically throughout Earth's history. The amount of oxygen in Earth's atmosphere hasn't been constant. After the Great Oxidation Event 2.4 billion years ago, oxygen levels rose but remained relatively low for hundreds of millions of years, probably less than 10% of current levels. Oxygen began to rise again in the late Proterozoic, reaching near modern levels by the Cambrian. During the Carboniferous, as we've seen, oxygen spiked to about 35%. These high levels persisted for tens of millions of years before declining in the Permian. During the Mesozoic era, the age of dinosaurs, oxygen levels were generally lower than today, possibly as low as 15% at times, though this is debated. Oxygen levels affect many aspects of life. High oxygen enables larger body sizes, particularly in insects and other organisms that breathe through diffusion. It also increases the risk and intensity of wildfires. Low oxygen limits activity levels and may restrict animals to lowland areas where the air is denser. The factors that control atmospheric oxygen are complex, involving the balance between oxygen production by photosynthetic organisms and oxygen consumption by respiration, decay, weathering of rocks, and volcanic activity. The burial of organic matter, particularly in forming coal and other sedimentary deposits, removes carbon from the active cycle and allows oxygen to accumulate. Understanding past oxygen levels helps us understand the evolutionary pressures that shaped life and the environments in which extinct organisms lived. The Permian-Triassic. Extinction killed 90% of all species. Mass extinctions, events where a significant proportion of species die out in a geologically short time, have occurred several times in Earth's history. The worst of these was the Permian-Triassic extinction, often called the Great Dying, which occurred about 252 million years ago. This event killed approximately 90% of all marine species and 70% of terrestrial vertebrate species. Entire groups of organisms disappeared forever. The trilobites, which had survived for 270 million years, went extinct. Many groups of marine invertebrates were decimated. On land, the dominant reptiles of the Permian were replaced by new groups in the Triassic. The causes of this extinction are still debated, but most scientists think it involved a combination of factors. Massive volcanic eruptions in Siberia released enormous amounts of lava, covering an area the size of Europe. These eruptions also released carbon dioxide and other gases, causing rapid global warming. The warming oceans released methane from seafloor deposits, creating further warming. Oxygen levels in the ocean dropped, creating dead zones. Ocean acidification made it difficult for organisms with calcium carbonate shells to survive. On land, acid rain and changes in climate devastated ecosystems. The extinction unfolded over perhaps 60,000 years, a blink in geological time, but long enough for the causes to compound and amplify. Life took millions of years to recover, and the world that emerged from the Permian-Triassic extinction was fundamentally different from the one that preceded it. Dinosaurs dominated the Mesozoic era for 180 million years. After the Permian-Triassic extinction, life slowly recovered and new groups of organisms diversified. Among the most successful were the dinosaurs, a group of reptiles that first appeared in the Triassic period about 230 million years ago. Dinosaurs came to dominate terrestrial ecosystems throughout the Mesozoic era, which lasted from 252 to 66 million years ago and is divided into three periods: the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous. Dinosaurs were remarkably diverse, ranging from tiny bird-like creatures weighing just a few kilograms to massive sauropods weighing 70 tons or more. Some were fierce predators with sharp teeth and claws. Others were gentle herbivores with elaborate defenses. Some walked on two legs, others on four. Some had armor, spikes, horns, or elaborate head crests. Many dinosaurs were likely covered in feathers, particularly the smaller theropods, and one group of feathered theropods eventually evolved into birds. Dinosaurs weren't cold-blooded lizards, but likely had metabolisms somewhere between modern reptiles and mammals, allowing them to be active and grow to large sizes while still being efficient in their energy use. They laid eggs, built nests, and in many cases cared for their young. The Mesozoic world belonged to the dinosaurs, and they thrived in every terrestrial environment from lush forests to arid deserts, from polar regions to tropical coastlines. Their success lasted far longer than mammals have been dominant, a testament to the effectiveness of their body plans and adaptations. The Mesozoic seas were ruled by marine reptiles. While dinosaurs dominated the land, other reptiles returned to the sea and became the apex predators of Mesozoic oceans. Ichthyosaurs, which means fish lizards, evolved a streamlined, dolphin-like body shape perfectly suited to fast swimming. They had large eyes for hunting in deep or murky water and gave birth to live young. Some ichthyosaurs grew to enormous sizes, with the largest known reaching over 20 meters in length. Plesiosaurs had long necks, small heads, and 4 large flippers, and they likely hunted by using their flexible necks to snake through schools of fish. Their relatives, the pliosaurs, had short necks but massive heads filled with teeth, making them formidable predators. Mosasaurs appeared later in the Cretaceous and quickly became dominant. These huge, lizard-like reptiles had powerful jaws, streamlined bodies, and could grow to 18 meters or more. They hunted fish, sea turtles, smaller marine reptiles, and even other mosasaurs. Unlike dinosaurs, which never fully adapted to marine life, these reptiles were completely aquatic, though they still breathed air and likely came to the surface regularly. The Mesozoic seas were as full of life and as dangerous as the land, with these marine reptiles filling the ecological roles that whales and sharks fill today. Like the dinosaurs, most of these marine reptiles disappeared in the mass extinction at the end of the Cretaceous. Though birds, the descendants of dinosaurs, survived and thrived, flowering plants revolutionized terrestrial ecosystems. For most of the Mesozoic, the plant life would have looked strange to modern eyes. Forests were dominated by conifers, ginkgos, cycads, and ferns. There were no flowers, no grass, no oak trees or roses, or any of the flowering plants that dominate modern landscapes. Then, in the early Cretaceous period, about 130 million years ago, the first flowering plants, or angiosperms, appeared. These plants had evolved a revolutionary reproductive strategy, enclosing their seeds in a protective fruit and advertising their need for pollinators with colorful, fragrant flowers. This innovation proved spectacularly successful. Flowering plants diversified rapidly, and by the end of the Cretaceous, they had become the dominant plant group in many environments. Flowers created new opportunities for insects, particularly bees, butterflies, and moths, which evolved in close association with the plants they pollinated. Fruits provided food for animals, which in turn helped disperse seeds. The rapid life cycles of many flowering plants allowed them to colonize disturbed habitats and recover quickly from setbacks. Today, angiosperms make up about 90% of all plant species, and they provide most of the food that humans and animals depend on. The rise of flowering plants fundamentally changed terrestrial ecosystems, increasing productivity, creating new niches, and supporting greater diversity of insects, birds, and mammals. It's hard to imagine a world without flowers, yet for most of Earth's history, such a world existed. The Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction ended the age of dinosaurs. 66 million years ago, the Mesozoic era came to an abrupt and catastrophic end. An asteroid or comet about 10 kilometers in diameter struck Earth near what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, creating a crater over 150 kilometers wide. The impact released energy equivalent to billions of atomic bombs, instantly vaporizing the rock at the impact site and sending a plume of debris high into the atmosphere. The shock wave triggered earthquakes and tsunamis. Fires ignited across continents. The debris ejected into the atmosphere circled the globe, blocking sunlight for months or years and causing temperatures to plummet. Photosynthesis ceased and food chains collapsed. Acid rain fell from the sky. About 75% of all species went extinct, including all non-avian dinosaurs, the pterosaurs that ruled the skies, most marine reptiles, and many other groups. The extinction was selective in strange ways. Crocodilians survived, as did many turtles, some birds, and small mammals. In the ocean, most surface-dwelling plankton died, but many bottom-dwelling organisms survived. The extinction marked the end of the Mesozoic era and the beginning of the Cenozoic, the age of mammals. In the aftermath, the world was devastated, but not lifeless. The survivors found themselves in a world suddenly emptied of competition, with ecological niches waiting to be filled. Small mammals that had lived in the shadows of dinosaurs for 160 million years suddenly had opportunities to diversify. Birds, the living descendants of dinosaurs, survived and radiated into new forms. The recovery took millions of years, but eventually new ecosystems emerged, different from what came before, but no less rich or complex. The Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction reminds us how fragile dominance can be, how a single catastrophic event can reshape the entire planet, and how the survivors, not necessarily the strongest or most impressive, inherit the Earth. Mammals remained small during the age of dinosaurs. For most of the Mesozoic era, while dinosaurs dominated terrestrial ecosystems, mammals existed but remained small, mostly nocturnal, and relatively inconspicuous. The first true mammals appeared in the late Triassic, about 225 million years ago, evolving from a group of reptiles called cynodonts. These early mammals were tiny shrew-like creatures that probably fed on insects and other small prey. Throughout the Jurassic and Cretaceous periods, mammals diversified into various forms, but almost all remained small, typically weighing less than a kilogram. Some were insectivores, others ate plants, and a few may have hunted small vertebrates. Many were nocturnal, active when dinosaurs were less of a threat. This nocturnal lifestyle may have driven the evolution of several mammalian features: better hearing, a more developed sense of smell, and fur for insulation during cool nights. Mammals also evolved warm-bloodedness, allowing them to remain active regardless of external temperatures, and they nourished their young with milk, providing extended parental care that increased offspring survival. Despite these innovations, mammals couldn't compete with dinosaurs in terms of size or ecological dominance. It was only after the extinction of non-avian dinosaurs that mammals had the opportunity to diversify and grow large. The lesson of Mesozoic mammals is one of patience and persistence. Sometimes survival means staying small and waiting for circumstances to change. After the dinosaurs, mammals rapidly diversified. In the early Paleocene epoch, just after the extinction of the dinosaurs, the world was a damaged place. Ecosystems were recovering, and the surviving species were adapting to new conditions. Mammals, freed from competition with dinosaurs, began to diversify at an extraordinary rate. Within 10 million years, mammals had evolved into forms filling nearly every ecological niche that dinosaurs once occupied. Some remained small, but others grew larger. By the Eocene epoch, about 50 million years ago, there were mammals as large as modern elephants. Some mammals returned to the water, giving rise to whales and dolphins. Others took to the air, though not through powered flight like birds, but through gliding. Primates appeared, our own distant ancestors living in the trees and developing grasping hands, forward-facing eyes, and larger brains. This rapid diversification, called an adaptive radiation, demonstrates how evolution can accelerate when ecological opportunity opens up. The forms that mammals took were often similar to dinosaurs that had filled the same niches, a phenomenon called convergent evolution, where unrelated organisms evolve similar solutions to similar challenges. The Cenozoic era, from 66 million years ago to the present, is sometimes called the Age of Mammals, though this might be unfair to birds, which are also incredibly diverse and successful. Still, mammals have certainly made their mark, becoming the dominant large land animals and developing some of the most complex behaviors and intelligence in the animal kingdom. Whales evolved from land mammals in just 10 million years. One of the most remarkable evolutionary transitions in the Cenozoic is the return of mammals to the sea and their evolution into whales. About 50 million years ago, a group of hoofed mammals related to modern hippos and cows began spending more time in water, perhaps feeding on fish in coastal areas. Over the next 10 million years, these animals became increasingly aquatic. Their limbs evolved into flippers, their tails developed into powerful flukes for propulsion, their nostrils migrated to the tops of their heads to become blowholes, and their bodies became streamlined. The fossil record of this transition is remarkably complete. We have fossils of early whales like Pachycetus, a wolf-sized animal with 4 legs that could still walk on land, but probably hunted in shallow water. We have Ambulocetus, which means walking whale, a larger, more aquatic form with powerful legs and a tail suited for swimming. We have Dorudon, which was fully aquatic, sleek, and dolphin-like, but still with tiny vestigial hind limbs visible in its skeleton. Modern whales retain these vestiges, tiny bones buried in their flesh where hips and legs once were, a reminder of their terrestrial ancestry. The evolution of whales shows how dramatically body plans can change when environments change, and how evolution can produce seemingly improbable transformations when natural selection has millions of years to work with. Today's whales, the largest animals ever to exist, are the descendants of small land mammals, a fact that still seems almost miraculous. Grass evolved relatively recently and changed the world. Grass seems like such a basic, ubiquitous plant that it's surprising to learn it's actually a relatively recent innovation. The first grasses appeared in the Cretaceous about 90 million years ago, but they remained minor components of ecosystems for tens of millions of years. It wasn't until the Miocene epoch, about 25 million years ago, that grasslands began to spread widely. Several factors contributed to the rise of grasslands. The climate was becoming cooler and drier in many regions, favoring plants that could tolerate drought and seasonal temperature extremes. Grass has several adaptations that make it successful in these conditions. It grows from the base rather than the tips, so it can survive grazing and cutting. It spreads through underground rhizomes, forming dense mats, and it completes its life cycle quickly, taking advantage of brief favorable periods. The spread of grasslands had profound effects on animal evolution. Grazing mammals diversified, developing specialized teeth for grinding tough grass and long legs for running on open plains. Horses evolved from small forest-dwelling browsers into larger, long-legged grazers. Elephants, rhinos, and many species of antelope, cattle, and sheep evolved in grassland environments. Predators adapted too, developing speed and stamina for hunting on open ground. Even today, Grasslands, including savannas, prairies, and steppes, support some of Earth's most spectacular wildlife assemblages. The humble grass plant, easy to overlook, has shaped continents and driven evolution for millions of years. The Himalayas are among Earth's youngest mountains. Mountains rise and fall on geological timescales, created by tectonic forces and worn down by erosion. The Himalayas, Earth's tallest mountain range, are also among its youngest, having begun forming only about 50 million years ago. They arose from the collision between the Indian subcontinent and Asia. India was once part of the southern supercontinent Gondwana, separated from Asia by a vast ocean called Tethys. About 200 million years ago, Gondwana began to break apart, and India drifted northward, moving at speeds of up to 15 centimeters per year, remarkably fast in geological terms. When India collided with Asia, neither continent would subduct beneath the other, because both were made of relatively light continental crust. Instead, the collision zone crumpled and uplifted, creating the Himalayan mountain range and the Tibetan plateau behind it. This collision is still happening today, with India continuing to push into Asia at about 5 centimeters per year. The Himalayas are still rising, though erosion removes material almost as fast as tectonic forces lift it. The formation of the Himalayas had global effects. The mountains altered atmospheric circulation patterns, possibly contributing to the strengthening of the monsoon in South Asia. The weathering of exposed Himalayan rock draws down carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, potentially contributing to long-term global cooling over the past 50 million years. The Himalayas also created a barrier that affected the distribution and evolution of plants and animals across Asia. These mountains, so iconic and seemingly eternal, are in geological terms quite young and still actively forming. Ice ages have repeatedly reshaped Earth's climate. For much of Earth's history, the climate was warmer than today, with ice-free poles and higher sea levels. But periodically, Earth enters icehouse periods when temperatures drop, ice sheets expand, and glaciers advance across the continents. The most recent icehouse period began about 2.6 million years ago at the start of the Pleistocene epoch and continues today. Though we're currently in an interglacial period, a warmer interval between glacial advances. During glacial maxima, ice sheets covered much of North America, Europe, and Asia, reaching thicknesses of several kilometers. Sea levels dropped by 120 meters or more as water became locked in ice, exposing land bridges and allowing animals and humans to migrate between continents. The climate was colder and drier, with expanded deserts and reduced forests. Animals adapted to these conditions, growing thick fur and large body sizes to conserve heat. Woolly mammoths, woolly rhinos, cave bears, and saber-toothed cats thrived in the Ice Age world. Then, every 100,000 years or so, the climate would warm during an interglacial period, the ice would retreat, forests would expand, and warmth-adapted species would flourish. These cycles are driven by changes in Earth's orbit and axial tilt, called Milankovitch cycles, which affect the amount and distribution of solar radiation reaching Earth's surface. We're currently in an interglacial period called the Holocene, which began about 11,700 years ago. Understanding Ice Age cycles helps us appreciate that climate change is natural and has always been part of Earth's story, though the current human-caused warming is occurring at a rate and scale unprecedented in the geological record. Megafauna roamed the Earth until very recently. During the Pleistocene epoch, the world was home to an incredible array of large animals, collectively called megafauna. In North America, there were mammoths and mastodons, giant ground sloths that could reach 6 meters in height, massive beavers the size of bears, dire wolves, saber-toothed cats, and the giant short-faced bear, one of the largest terrestrial carnivores ever to exist. South America had its own unique megafauna, including Glyptodon, a car-sized armadillo, and Macrauchenia, a strange camel-like creature with a trunk. In Australia, giant kangaroos stood 3 meters tall, carnivorous marsupial lions hunted, and enormous wombats the size of rhinos browsed on vegetation. Eurasia had woolly mammoths, woolly rhinos, cave lions, and giant deer with antler spans of nearly 4 meters. Many islands had their own megafauna, including pygmy elephants in the Mediterranean and giant lemurs in Madagascar. Then, beginning around 50,000 years ago and accelerating toward the end of the Pleistocene about 11,000 years ago, most of these large animals went extinct. In North America, 34 genera of large mammals disappeared. Australia lost most of its megafauna. The causes of these extinctions are debated, but most scientists think a combination of climate change at the end of the last ice age and human hunting pressure drove many species to extinction. Humans had evolved into skilled hunters, and when they spread to new continents, they encountered animals that had never experienced human predation and had no instinctive fear. The loss of these megafauna dramatically altered ecosystems and represents one of the great losses of biodiversity in recent Earth history. Humans evolved in Africa during the Pleistocene. Our own species, Homo sapiens, is a very recent addition to Earth's biodiversity, having evolved in Africa sometime between 300,000 and 200,000 years ago. We are part of the primate order, specifically the great apes, and our closest living relatives are chimpanzees and bonobos, with whom we shared a common ancestor about 6 to 7 million years ago. The human lineage underwent numerous evolutionary changes. We became bipedal, walking upright on 2 legs. Our brains enlarged dramatically. We developed complex language and symbolic thinking, and we created sophisticated tools and culture. For most of our existence, humans lived as hunter-gatherers in small mobile groups, dependent on wild plants and animals for survival. About 70,000 years ago, modern humans began dispersing out of Africa, eventually colonizing every continent except Antarctica. We reached the Middle East, then spread into Asia and Europe, where we encountered and briefly coexisted with Neanderthals and other archaic human species. We crossed into Australia by 65,000 years ago, requiring sophisticated boats to make the journey. We reached the Americas by at least 15,000 years ago, possibly earlier, crossing the Bering Land Bridge during a time when sea levels were lower. Everywhere humans went, we adapted to local conditions, developing different technologies, cultures, and physical characteristics. But despite this diversity, all modern humans belong to a single species, more genetically similar to each other than different populations of most other animal species. Our evolutionary success came not from physical prowess, but from our intelligence, cooperation, and ability to adapt culturally to new environments. The Holocene saw the development of agriculture and civilization. About 11,700 years ago, the Pleistocene epoch ended and the Holocene began, marking the end of the last glacial period and the beginning of the current interglacial. The climate warmed, ice sheets retreated, sea levels rose, and ecosystems shifted. For humans, this period of climate stability created conditions favorable for a revolutionary change, the development of agriculture. Beginning around 10,000 years ago in the Fertile Crescent of the Middle East, humans began intentionally planting and harvesting crops, initially wheat and barley, and domesticating animals like sheep, goats, and cattle. Agriculture arose independently in several other regions, in China with rice and millet, in Mesoamerica with maize and beans, in South America with potatoes and quinoa, and in Africa with sorghum and yams. Agriculture allowed people to produce surplus food, which in turn supported larger sedentary populations. Villages grew into towns and eventually cities. Social hierarchies developed. Specialized occupations emerged: artisans, priests, soldiers, administrators. Writing was invented to keep records. Monumental architecture was constructed. Trade networks spread ideas and goods across continents. The Holocene has been a period of unprecedented human cultural development, from the first agricultural villages to the complex interconnected global civilization of today. Yet in geological terms, the Holocene is just another brief interglacial period, and the long-term trajectory of climate suggests that, absent human influence, Earth would eventually descend into another ice age. However, Human activities, particularly the burning of fossil fuels and the release of greenhouse gases, have altered the climate system so significantly that some scientists suggest we've entered a new epoch. The Anthropocene, defined by human impact on the planet. Fossil fuels are ancient solar energy stored in rock. The coal, oil, and natural gas that power much of modern civilization are actually prehistoric organic matter transformed by heat and pressure over millions of years. Coal formed primarily during the Carboniferous and Permian periods 360 to 250 million years ago from the compressed remains of ancient swamp forests. When these plants died, they accumulated in oxygen-poor swamps where decay was slow. Over time, layers of sediment buried this plant material, and heat and pressure gradually transformed it, first into peat, then into lignite, then into bituminous coal, and finally, with enough heat and pressure, into anthracite. Oil and natural gas formed mainly from the remains of marine microorganisms, plankton that lived in ancient seas millions of years ago. When these organisms died, they sank to the seafloor and were buried by sediment. In the absence of oxygen, they didn't decay completely. Over millions of years, heat and pressure transformed this organic matter into kerogen, and with further heating, into liquid oil and natural gas. These hydrocarbons migrated through porous rock until they were trapped beneath impermeable layers, forming reservoirs. When we burn fossil fuels, we're releasing energy that was captured from sunlight by photosynthesis hundreds of millions of years ago, completing a cycle that spans the vast depths of geological time. Fossil fuels are a remarkable gift from the ancient Earth, but they're also finite. They took millions of years to form, and we're consuming them in mere centuries, releasing ancient carbon back into the atmosphere at rates that are altering the planet's climate. Mass extinctions have punctuated Earth's history. Throughout Earth's long history, there have been 5 major mass extinctions, events where more than 75% of species disappeared in a geologically short time. We've already discussed 2, the Permian-Triassic extinction 252 million years ago, the worst of all, and the Cretaceous-Paleogene extinction 66 million years ago that ended the dinosaurs. The other 3 are the Ordovician-Silurian extinction 443 million years ago, likely caused by climate change and glaciation. The late Devonian extinction about 375 million years ago, which may have been caused by anoxic ocean conditions and the spread of land plants altering the global carbon cycle, and the Triassic-Jurassic extinction 201 million years ago, linked to volcanic eruptions and climate change. Each mass extinction was caused by different factors, but common themes include rapid climate change, ocean acidification, anoxia, lack of oxygen in oceans, volcanic eruptions, and asteroid impacts. After each mass extinction, life recovered, though it took millions of years. New groups diversified to fill empty niches, and ecosystems gradually regained complexity. Interestingly, mass extinctions can accelerate evolution in the long run by removing dominant groups and allowing previously minor groups to flourish. Mammals, for instance, only became dominant after dinosaurs were removed. Some scientists now argue that we're in the midst of a 6th mass extinction driven by human activities, habitat destruction, overhunting, pollution, climate change, and the spread of invasive species. Current extinction rates are estimated to be 100 to 1,000 times higher than background rates, and iconic groups like amphibians, large mammals, and coral reef species are particularly threatened. Unlike previous mass extinctions, this one is being caused by a single species in a geological instant, raising profound questions about our responsibility to the rest of life on Earth. Continental drift continues today. The movement of continents didn't stop with the formation of Pangaea or its breakup into the continents we know today. Plate tectonics continues, and the map of Earth's surface is still changing, albeit at speeds measured in centimeters per year. The Atlantic Ocean continues to widen as North and South America drift away from Europe and Africa. The Pacific Ocean is shrinking as subduction zones around its edges consume sea floor. India continues to push into Asia, raising the Himalayas higher. East Africa is slowly splitting apart along the East African Rift, and millions of years from now, this rift may become a new ocean, separating a piece of East Africa from the rest of the continent. Australia is drifting northward toward Southeast Asia and will eventually collide with it. Looking further into the future, scientists have modeled what Earth's surface might look like hundreds of millions of years from now. One scenario suggests the formation of a new supercontinent called Pangaea Ultima, where the continents drift together over the closing Atlantic Ocean, forming a single landmass in about 250 million years. Another scenario, Amasia, has the continents drifting northward to converge around the North Pole in about 200 million years. These predictions are speculative, as small changes in plate motions can have large effects over such timescales. But what's certain is that continental drift will continue as long as Earth's interior remains hot, and convection currents drive the motion of plates. The continents we know are just one frame in a very long film, and future Earths will have geographies as different from ours as Pangaea was. Earth's magnetic field has reversed hundreds of times. Earth's magnetic field, generated by the motion of molten iron in the planet's outer core, protects us from harmful solar radiation and cosmic rays. But this field is not stable. Throughout Earth's history, the magnetic poles have reversed hundreds of times, with north and south switching places. These reversals are recorded in rocks, particularly in oceanic crust formed at mid-ocean ridges, where cooling lava preserves the direction of the magnetic field at the time it solidified. By studying these magnetic stripes, scientists have reconstructed a history of field reversals going back hundreds of millions of years. The reversals are irregular, occurring on average every few 100,000 years, but the interval between reversals varies widely. The last reversal was about 7,000 to 80,000 years ago, and we're overdue for another based on the average frequency, though overdue in geological terms doesn't mean it will happen soon. The reversal process itself takes a few thousand years, during which the field weakens and becomes chaotic, with multiple poles wandering around before settling into a new configuration. During this time, Earth's magnetic protection weakens, potentially exposing the surface to higher levels of radiation. There is no evidence that past reversals caused mass extinctions, but they may have affected atmospheric chemistry and climate in subtle ways. The magnetic field also appears to be weakening now, declining about 5% per century, which has led to speculation that we might be heading toward a reversal. However, the field's strength fluctuates naturally, and this weakening may just be part of normal variation. Magnetic reversals are a reminder that even features of Earth we think of as fixed and permanent are actually dynamic on geological timescales. Volcanoes have shaped Earth's surface and atmosphere. Volcanic eruptions are spectacular and often destructive, but they have also been crucial in shaping Earth's surface and atmosphere throughout its history. Volcanoes form where tectonic plates interact, at subduction zones where one plate dives beneath another, melting and producing magma, at mid-ocean ridges where plates pull apart and magma rises to fill the gap, and at hotspots where plumes of hot material rise from deep in the mantle. Over Earth's history, volcanic activity has varied in intensity. During periods of high volcanic activity, such as the formation of large igneous provinces, massive amounts of lava covered huge areas, sometimes millions of square kilometers. These eruptions released enormous quantities of gases, including carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and water vapor, affecting global climate and atmospheric chemistry. Some mass extinctions are linked to these large eruptions. The Siberian Traps eruptions, which occurred during the Permian-Triassic extinction, released enough gas to cause severe global warming and ocean acidification. On the other hand, volcanic eruptions have also built the land we live on, creating islands and mountain ranges. The volcanic gases released over Earth's history, particularly water vapor and carbon dioxide, helped form the atmosphere and oceans. Without volcanoes, Earth would be a very different planet, possibly a cold, dry world with little atmosphere and no plate tectonics. Even today, Volcanoes play important roles in replenishing nutrients in soils, creating new land, and contributing to the carbon cycle. They're a reminder that Earth is not a dead rock, but a living, breathing planet with a hot interior that continues to shape the surface. Meteorites have delivered water and organic compounds to Earth. Throughout Earth's history, meteorites, asteroids, and comets have crashed into the planet, sometimes with catastrophic effects like the asteroid that ended the dinosaurs. But these impacts have also delivered materials that were crucial for life. In Earth's early history, during the period called the Late Heavy Bombardment, about 4 billion years ago, countless asteroids and comets struck the inner solar system. Many of these objects contained water ice, and their impacts may have delivered much of the water that now fills Earth's oceans. Comets, which are often called dirty snowballs because they're made of ice mixed with rock and organic compounds, also brought complex organic molecules. These included amino acids, the building blocks of proteins, and nucleobases, components of DNA and RNA. Meteorites still fall to Earth today, and when scientists analyze them, they often find organic compounds that formed in space. The Murchison meteorite, which fell in Australia in 1969, contains over 70 different amino acids, most of which don't occur naturally on Earth. This suggests that the raw materials for life may have been delivered from space, seeding the early Earth with the chemical ingredients necessary for biology. It's a humbling thought. The water we drink, the organic molecules in our bodies, may have come from asteroids and comets that formed elsewhere in the solar system and crashed into our planet billions of years ago. We are, in a very real sense, made of stardust and space ice, children of the cosmos. Impact craters scar Earth's surface. When large asteroids or comets strike Earth, they create impact craters, bowl-shaped depressions surrounded by raised rims and ejected material. On bodies like the Moon, which have no atmosphere or geological activity to erase them, craters accumulate over billions of years, creating a heavily cratered surface that records the entire history of bombardment. Earth, by contrast, has relatively few visible craters because erosion, weathering, and plate tectonics gradually erase them. Still, about 190 impact craters have been identified on Earth, ranging in size from small features just a few meters across to the massive Vredefort crater in South Africa, which is about 300 kilometers in diameter and formed over 2 billion years ago. The Chicxulub crater in Mexico, site of the asteroid impact that ended the Cretaceous, is about 150 kilometers wide. Impact craters tell us about Earth's violent past, recording collisions that released energies equivalent to millions or billions of nuclear weapons. Large impacts can cause global catastrophes, throwing up dust and debris that block sunlight, causing fires, triggering tsunamis, and releasing toxic gases. But impacts have also delivered materials from space and may have influenced the evolution of life by causing extinctions that allowed new groups to diversify. In the early solar system, impacts were far more frequent, and Earth's surface was constantly being reshaped by collisions. As the solar system matured and most of the debris was swept up, impact rates declined. Today, large impacts are rare, happening on average every few tens of millions of years. But they remain a potential threat, which is why scientists monitor near-Earth asteroids and develop plans for deflecting any that might be on a collision course with our planet. Earth's inner core is solid iron. Beneath our feet, Earth has a layered structure. The thin, rocky crust we live on floats on the mantle, a thick layer of hot, slowly flowing rock that extends down about 2,900 kilometers. Below the mantle is the outer core, a layer of liquid iron and nickel about 2,300 kilometers thick. The outer core's motion generates Earth's magnetic field through a process called the geodynamo. At the center of the planet, under immense pressure, is the inner core, a solid sphere of iron and nickel about 1,200 kilometers in radius. Despite temperatures reaching 5,000 to 6,000 degrees Celsius, hot as the surface of the sun, the inner core remains solid because the pressure is so extreme that the iron cannot melt. The inner core is slowly growing as the Earth cools, with liquid iron from the outer core crystallizing onto the inner core's surface at a rate of about 1 millimeter per year. This crystallization releases heat and light elements, helping drive the convection in the outer core that generates the magnetic field. Studying the inner core is challenging because we can't reach it directly. Our deepest boreholes penetrate only about 12 kilometers, barely scratching the surface. Instead, scientists study seismic waves from earthquakes, which travel through the Earth and provide information about its internal structure. These studies have revealed that the inner core rotates slightly faster than the rest of the planet and has a complex structure, possibly with an inner core with different properties. The inner core is a frontier of Earth science, a realm as remote and inaccessible as the deep ocean or outer space, yet crucial to understanding how our planet works. The rock cycle continuously remakes Earth's crust. Rocks seem permanent and unchanging, but on geological timescales, they're constantly being created, destroyed, and transformed in a process called the rock cycle. There are three main types of rocks. Igneous rocks form from cooled magma or lava. Sedimentary rocks form from compressed sediments like sand, mud, and organic material. And metamorphic rocks form when existing rocks are transformed by heat and pressure without melting. These rock types can transform into each other. Igneous rocks can be weathered and eroded into sediments that become sedimentary rocks. Sedimentary or igneous rocks can be buried deep in the earth where heat and pressure transform them into metamorphic rocks. Metamorphic rocks can be subducted and melted, becoming magma that eventually cools into new igneous rocks. This cycle operates over millions of years, driven by plate tectonics and the heat from Earth's interior. The rock cycle recycles materials, bringing elements from deep in the earth to the surface and burying surface materials to great depths. It creates the diverse landscapes we see, from towering mountain ranges of metamorphic rock to flat plains of sedimentary layers to volcanic fields of fresh igneous rock. Understanding the rock cycle helps geologists read Earth's history in stone, recognizing that today's mountains were yesterday's sea floors, and that the rocks beneath our feet have been through countless transformations, participating in the endless recycling of Earth's crust. Erosion and weathering sculpt the landscape. While tectonic forces build mountains and create new crust, erosion and weathering work to tear them down. Weathering is the breakdown of rock into smaller pieces through physical, chemical, or biological processes. Physical weathering includes the expansion of water freezing in cracks, the heating and cooling of rock surfaces, and the grinding action of glaciers. Chemical weathering involves reactions between rock minerals and water, oxygen, or acids, dissolving minerals and transforming them into new compounds. Biological weathering occurs when living organisms, from bacteria to tree roots, break down rock. Erosion is the transport of weathered material by water, wind, ice, or gravity. Rivers carve valleys carrying sediment downstream to be deposited in deltas and floodplains. Wind sculpts deserts, creating dunes and stripping away fine particles. Glaciers scrape bedrock, creating U-shaped valleys and dumping moraines of ground-up rock. Mass wasting, the downslope movement of material under gravity, creates landslides, mudflows, and slowly creeping hillsides. Together, erosion and weathering are constantly reshaping Earth's surface, lowering mountains, filling basins, and creating the varied topography we see. Without these processes, mountains would grow ever higher, and the land would be choked with volcanic debris. Erosion and weathering are also crucial for the carbon cycle, as the weathering of silicate rocks consumes carbon dioxide, helping regulate Earth's climate over millions of years. The landscape around us is in constant flux, shaped by the interplay between constructive tectonic forces and destructive erosional processes. Soil is a thin, precious layer created over millennia. We often think of soil as just dirt, something common and unremarkable, but soil is actually one of Earth's most complex and valuable resources. Soil forms from the weathering of rock combined with organic matter from decomposing plants and animals. This process takes hundreds to thousands of years to produce just a few centimeters of soil. A mature soil has distinct layers or horizons, a surface layer rich in organic matter, underlying layers where minerals have been leached or accumulated, and deeper layers of weathered bedrock. Soil teems with life, containing more organisms than there are people on Earth in just a handful. Bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, insects, earthworms, and countless other organisms live in soil, breaking down organic matter, recycling nutrients, and creating the structure that allows plant roots to penetrate and water to infiltrate. Without soil, terrestrial ecosystems as we know them couldn't exist. Plants need soil to anchor their roots and obtain water and nutrients. Animals depend on plants, so they depend on soil indirectly. Humans rely on soil for agriculture, for growing the crops that feed us. Yet soil is being lost at alarming rates due to erosion, degradation, and urbanization. It takes centuries to form, but can be lost in years if not protected. The thin layer of soil covering much of Earth's land surface represents millions of years of geological and biological activity, a precious inheritance from the past that we must steward carefully for the future. Earth's climate has ranged from hothouse to icehouse. Over its 4.6 billion year history, Earth's climate has varied dramatically, from periods so warm that there was no ice anywhere on the planet to periods so cold that ice covered even the tropics. During hothouse periods, which were common in the Mesozoic era, global temperatures were perhaps 10 to 15 degrees Celsius warmer than today. There were no polar ice caps, sea levels were much higher, and tropical or subtropical conditions extended to high latitudes. Forests grew in Antarctica, and crocodile relatives lived in the Arctic. These warm conditions were maintained by high levels of atmospheric carbon dioxide, often several times higher than today, which created a strong greenhouse effect. The calm, warm climate also meant different ocean circulation patterns and possibly more intense tropical storms. During icehouse periods, like the current Cenozoic Ice Age that began 2.6 million years ago, ice sheets cover the poles and glaciers extend into mid-latitudes. Temperatures are cooler, sea levels lower, and climate more variable. The transitions between icehouse and hothouse states take millions of years and are driven by changes in plate tectonics, which affect carbon dioxide levels through volcanic activity, and rock weathering by changes in solar output, and by feedbacks involving ice albedo, vegetation, and ocean circulation. Understanding these long-term climate changes helps us appreciate that Earth's climate is not fixed, but is always varied. However, it also shows us that changes in atmospheric carbon dioxide have profound effects on global temperature, a lesson that's highly relevant as human activities rapidly increase CO2 levels today. Life and geology co-evolve. One of the profound insights of modern Earth science is that life and the planet's geology are not separate, but deeply interconnected, co-evolving over billions of years. Life has transformed Earth's atmosphere, oceans, and even rocks. The oxygen we breathe was produced by photosynthetic organisms. The limestone and chalk deposits that form massive geological formations are made from the shells of countless marine organisms. Coal is ancient plant material. Oil is ancient marine plankton. Soil is created partly by biological activity. Life affects weathering rates, influences climate, and even contributes to plate tectonics by lubricating subduction zones with water and organic material. Conversely, geology affects life by creating habitats, influencing climate, providing nutrients, and occasionally causing extinctions through volcanic eruptions or the impact of allowing asteroids to strike. The evolution of life and the evolution of Earth are intertwined, each shaping the other in a complex dance that has been going on for billions of years. This perspective, sometimes called Earth system science or Gaia theory in its more controversial forms, sees the planet as an integrated system where biological, geological, atmospheric, and oceanic processes interact. It's a holistic view that recognizes we can't fully understand life without understanding geology, and vice versa. It also has practical implications. It suggests that human activities, by altering the atmosphere, climate, and biosphere, are not just environmental issues, but are changing the fundamental functioning of the entire Earth system. The Anthropocene marks humanity's geological footprint. While geologists officially recognize only the Holocene as the current epoch, there's growing discussion about whether we've entered a new epoch called the Anthropocene, defined by humanity's significant impact on the planet. The concept was popularized by atmospheric chemist Paul Crutzen in 2000, and it reflects the reality that human activities are now major drivers of geological and ecological change. We've altered the composition of the atmosphere, increasing carbon dioxide levels higher than they've been in millions of years. We've changed the chemistry of the oceans, making them more acidic. We've modified more than half of Earth's ice-free land surface through agriculture, urbanization, and resource extraction. We've moved more earth and rock through mining and construction than all the world's rivers combined. We've driven extinction rates to levels not seen since the dinosaurs disappeared. We've spread synthetic materials like plastics across the planet, creating a marker layer that will be visible in rocks millions of years from now. We've even altered the radioactive signature of sediments through nuclear testing. The question of when the Anthropocene began is debated. Some suggest it started with the agricultural revolution 10,000 years ago. Others point to the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s, when fossil fuel use began in earnest. Still others propose the mid-20th century, marked by nuclear testing and the great acceleration of population growth, resource consumption, and environmental impacts. Regardless of the exact boundary, the concept of the Anthropocene is powerful because it recognizes that humans have become a geological force, that our actions will be visible in the rock record long after our civilization has vanished. It's both humbling and sobering, a reminder that we have tremendous power but also tremendous responsibility. Ancient climates can be reconstructed from ice cores and sediments. How do we know what Earth's climate was like millions or even billions of years ago? Scientists use proxies, indirect indicators preserved in rocks, ice, and sediments that provide clues about past conditions. One of the most valuable archives is ice cores drilled from ice sheets in Greenland and Antarctica. These ice cores contain layers representing annual snowfall going back hundreds of thousands of years. Trapped within the ice are tiny bubbles containing ancient air, preserving samples of the atmosphere from the past. By analyzing these bubbles, scientists can measure past levels of carbon dioxide, methane, and other gases. Isotopes in the ice itself provide information about past temperatures. The deepest ice cores extend back about 800,000 years, revealing multiple cycles of ice ages and interglacial periods. For older periods, scientists turn to ocean sediments, which accumulate continuously on the seafloor over millions of years. The shells of microscopic organisms in these sediments contain chemical signatures that reflect ocean temperature and chemistry. By drilling cores from the ocean floor and analyzing the layers, scientists can reconstruct climate going back tens of millions of years. For even older periods, scientists examine rocks, looking at features like glacial deposits, coal beds, and coral reefs that indicate specific climate conditions. They study the ratios of different isotopes in minerals, which vary with temperature. They look at fossilized pollen and leaves, which indicate what plants were growing, and thus what the climate was like. Through these methods, scientists have assembled a detailed picture of Earth's climate history, revealing a planet that has experienced dramatic changes, but also showing clear relationships between greenhouse gas levels, temperature, and other climate variables. This paleoclimate research is crucial for understanding current and future climate change. Tectonic activity may have enabled complex life, One intriguing hypothesis in earth science is that plate tectonics, which seems unrelated to biology, may actually have been necessary for the evolution of complex life. Plate tectonics regulates Earth's climate over geological timescales through the carbon cycle. Volcanic activity releases carbon dioxide from the Earth's interior, while the weathering of silicate rocks consumes CO2. Plate tectonics continuously recycles rocks through subduction and uplift, maintaining this balance and keeping Earth's climate relatively stable, neither freezing solid nor becoming too hot for liquid water. Without plate tectonics, this regulation might not work, and the planet might either freeze or overheat. Plate tectonics also creates diverse environments: deep ocean trenches, shallow seas, mountain ranges, and varied coastlines, providing numerous ecological niches for organisms to exploit. The movement of continents causes populations to separate and reunite, driving evolution through isolation and competition. Subduction zones return water and minerals to the mantle, which are later released at volcanic arcs and hydrothermal vents, providing nutrients and chemical energy. Some scientists point out that among the planets and moons in our solar system, only Earth has both active plate tectonics and complex life. Though whether one caused the other or both are independent consequences of Earth's size and composition remains debated. Nevertheless, the idea that the solid Earth's geological activity is intimately connected to the biosphere's evolution is a fascinating example of how our planet functions as an integrated system. The Great Unconformity represents 1 billion years of missing rock. In many places around the world, particularly visible in the Grand Canyon, there is a geological feature called the Great Unconformity, a boundary where very old rocks, often more than 1 billion years old, are overlain directly by much younger rocks, perhaps 500 million years old. This represents a gap in the rock record of more than 500 million years, during which either no sediments were deposited or rocks that were deposited were later eroded away. The Great Unconformity is found globally, suggesting a worldwide event or process. Several hypotheses have been proposed to explain it. One suggests that during snowball Earth episodes, glaciers covered the continents and scraped away hundreds of millions of years' worth of rock. Another proposes that the breakup of the supercontinent Rodinia raised continents higher, exposing more rock to erosion. A third idea is that the rise of primitive life, particularly lichens and other organisms that enhance weathering, increased erosion rates. The Great Unconformity is significant, not just for the missing time it represents, but also for what came after. The rocks above the unconformity often contain fossils from the Cambrian explosion, that burst of animal diversity we discussed earlier. Some scientists speculate that the erosion associated with the Great Unconformity released nutrients into the oceans, potentially triggering or contributing to the conditions that allowed complex life to flourish. The Great Unconformity is a reminder that the rock record is incomplete, full of gaps where time has been erased by erosion or where conditions didn't favor the preservation of rocks. Reading Earth's history requires recognizing these gaps and piecing together what happened during the missing intervals. Stromatolite diversity peaked billions of years ago. We mentioned stromatolites earlier as some of the oldest evidence of life, but it's worth noting that these structures were far more common and diverse in the past than they are today. During the Proterozoic eon, from 5 billion to 541 million years ago, stromatolites were the dominant feature of shallow marine environments worldwide. They came in many shapes and sizes. Some formed flat mats, others grew as columns or domes, some branched like corals. They commonly covered vast areas of seafloor, creating underwater landscapes unlike anything we see today. Then, during the Cambrian explosion, stromatolites began to decline. The rise of grazing animals, particularly mollusks and arthropods that could scrape the surface of stromatolites and consume the cyanobacteria, made it harder for stromatolites to grow. Burrowing animals disrupted the sediments where stromatolites formed. Stromatolites didn't disappear entirely, but they became restricted to environments where grazers were rare or absent, typically very salty or very alkaline waters. Today, stromatolites are found in only a few locations worldwide, most famously Shark Bay in Australia. These modern stromatolites are relics, living fossils that give us a window into what the ancient Earth looked like. Studying them helps us understand how early ecosystems functioned and how the evolution of complex life changed the planet. The decline of stromatolites is one of the ways that the Cambrian explosion reshaped marine ecosystems, replacing microbial-dominated environments with the animal-dominated systems we're familiar with today. Oxygen levels affected insect and animal sizes. We've mentioned that the giant insects of the Carboniferous were possible because of high oxygen levels, but it's worth exploring this relationship more deeply. Insects breathe through a system of tubes called tracheae that deliver oxygen directly to tissues through diffusion. This system is efficient, but has limitations. Oxygen can only diffuse a certain distance before concentrations become too low. In a high oxygen atmosphere, oxygen can diffuse farther, allowing insects to have larger bodies. In the Carboniferous, with oxygen levels around 35%, dragonflies with 70-centimeter wingspans and millipedes over 2 meters long could exist. When oxygen levels declined in the Permian and Triassic, insects became smaller. For vertebrates, the relationship between oxygen and size is more complex. Vertebrates have lungs and circulatory systems that actively transport oxygen, so they're not as directly limited by atmospheric oxygen levels. However, low oxygen still affects them, particularly at high altitudes or during periods when oxygen levels were globally depressed. Some scientists think that dinosaurs' respiratory systems, which were highly efficient with air sacs that allowed one-way flow through the lungs, may have been an adaptation to lower oxygen levels during the Mesozoic. Birds, which inherited this respiratory system from their dinosaur ancestors, are able to fly at extreme altitudes where oxygen is thin, an advantage that might trace back to adaptations for low oxygen environments millions of years ago. The Aiz-Uwan relationship between atmospheric oxygen and animal size is one example of how abiotic factors can shape evolution, constraining or enabling certain body plans depending on environmental conditions. Early plants lacked roots and leaves as we know them. The first land plants, which appeared about 470 million years ago, were very different from modern plants. They lacked true roots, instead having simple rhizoids, hair-like structures that anchored them to the substrate and absorbed water. They had no leaves, just simple branching stems that carried out photosynthesis. They reproduced with spores, and their life cycles alternated between a gametophyte generation that produced gametes and a sporophyte generation that produced spores. These plants stayed small, generally less than a few centimeters tall, growing in dense mats in damp areas. The evolution of vascular tissue, specialized cells for transporting water and nutrients, was a crucial innovation that allowed plants to grow taller and colonize drier environments. Xylem transports water from roots to leaves, and phloem transports sugars from leaves to other parts of the plant. With vascular tissue, plants could support themselves without water's buoyancy, and could transport resources efficiently through their bodies. The evolution of true roots allowed plants to mine water and nutrients from deeper in the soil, and to anchor themselves more firmly. The evolution of leaves, which happened multiple times independently in different plant groups, greatly increased the surface area available for photosynthesis, making plants more productive. By the Devonian, about 400 million years ago, these innovations had led to the first forests. The transition from simple, mat-forming plants to the diverse, complex plant life we see today took tens of millions of years of evolutionary experimentation. But each innovation opened new possibilities and allowed plants to further transform terrestrial environments. Seeds were a revolutionary, evolutionary innovation. For plants to fully conquer dry land, They needed a way to reproduce without relying on water to carry sperm to eggs, as mosses and ferns do. The solution was the seed, a protected package containing an embryo plant, a food supply, and a tough outer coat. Seeds evolved during the Devonian period about 360 million years ago. The earliest seed plants, called seed ferns, looked somewhat like ferns but reproduced with seeds rather than spores. True conifers appeared in the Carboniferous, with seeds borne in cones. Seeds provided several advantages. They protected the embryo from desiccation and physical damage. They included stored food, giving the seedling a head start when it germinated. They could remain dormant for extended periods, waiting for favorable conditions. They could be dispersed by wind, water, or animals, allowing plants to colonize new areas. Seeds were so successful that seed plants came to dominate terrestrial ecosystems, and they still do today. The two main groups of seed plants are gymnosperms, which include conifers, cycads, and ginkgos, and angiosperms, the flowering plants, which evolved much later in the Cretaceous. Seeds represent one of evolution's most successful innovations, an elegant solution to the challenge of reproducing on land that has enabled plants to thrive in every terrestrial environment, from rainforests to deserts. Insects evolved flight before any other animal. Insects were the first animals to achieve powered flight, appearing in the fossil record about 320 million years ago in the Carboniferous period. How insect flight evolved is still debated. Some scientists think wings evolved from gill-like structures on aquatic insect ancestors. Others propose they evolved from paranodal lobes, lateral extensions of the thorax that may have been used for gliding. Once flight evolved, it provided enormous advantages, escaping predators, finding food and mates, and colonizing new habitats. Insects diversified explosively, and today they're the most diverse group of animals on Earth. Flight in insects differs from flight in birds or bats. Insect wings are not modified limbs, but entirely new structures. They're powered by complex flight muscles that can beat the wings at incredible frequencies, up to 1,000 beats per second in some midges. Insects can hover, fly backward, and perform aerial maneuvers that would be impossible for other flying animals. The evolution of insect flight had profound effects on terrestrial ecosystems. Flying insects pollinated plants, leading to the coevolution of flowers and their pollinators. They dispersed seeds and spores. They became prey for other animals, driving the evolution of insectivorous birds, bats, and other predators. For 150 million years, insects had the skies to themselves, until pterosaurs evolved flight in the Triassic, followed much later by birds and eventually bats. But insects remain the most diverse flying animals, a testament to the success of their early conquest of the air. Amber preserves ancient life in exquisite detail. Amber is fossilized tree resin, and it has a special place in paleontology because it can preserve organisms in extraordinary detail. When sticky resin oozes from a tree, it can trap insects, spiders, and other small animals. As the resin hardens and is buried, it fossilizes into amber, preserving the trapped organisms as three-dimensional fossils, sometimes with soft tissues, colors, and even DNA partially intact. Amber deposits are found around the world, with some of the most famous coming from the Baltic region and from Myanmar. The oldest known amber containing biological inclusions dates back about 320 million years to the Carboniferous. Amber fossils have revealed extinct insects, ancient spiders, feathers from dinosaurs and early birds, lizards, frogs, and even the hair of prehistoric mammals. Because amber can preserve such fine details, it provides information that can't be obtained from compression fossils in rock. Scientists have studied the structure of ancient feathers, the anatomy of extinct insects, and even the gut contents of trapped organisms. Amber has also yielded ancient DNA, though attempts to extract viable DNA from amber-preserved insects, as in Jurassic Park, have not been successful. The DNA is too degraded and fragmented. Nevertheless, amber remains one of the most valuable sources of information about ancient life. a time capsule that captures moments from millions of years ago with remarkable fidelity. Petrified forests show ancient woodlands turned to stone. Petrified wood is another remarkable form of fossilization where organic material is replaced by minerals, preserving the structure of wood and stone. This occurs when a tree is buried rapidly, often by volcanic ash or sediment, cutting off oxygen and slowing decay. Groundwater rich in dissolved minerals, typically silica, permeates the wood. Over time, the minerals crystallize within the wood's cells, replacing the organic material molecule by molecule while preserving the original structure. The result is stone that looks like wood, sometimes retaining even the growth rings and cellular structure visible under a microscope. Petrified forests, where many trees have been preserved together, offer windows into ancient ecosystems. The Petrified Forest National Park in Arizona contains trees from the Triassic period, about 225 million years ago, when the area was a lush floodplain with rivers and wetlands. These petrified logs, some over 50 meters long, show a diversity of tree types and provide information about the climate and environment. Other notable petrified forests exist around the world, each telling the story of forests long vanished, their trees transformed from living organisms to stone, yet still recognizable. Walking among petrified logs is a strange and moving experience, touching wood that is no longer wood, trees that grew and fell long before humans existed, now frozen in stone as testament to the forests of deep time. Trilobite eyes were made of calcite crystals. Trilobites, those iconic Paleozoic arthropods, had remarkable eyes that represent one of the earliest examples of complex vision in animals. Most trilobites had compound eyes similar to those of modern insects, with many individual lenses packed together. But unlike modern compound eyes, trilobite lenses were made of calcite, the same mineral that forms limestone. This is the only known case of organisms using calcite for vision. Calcite has optical properties that can focus light, and trilobites evolved lenses with precise shapes to minimize optical aberrations. Some trilobites even had doublet lenses, with 2 layers of calcite with different orientations, correcting for spherical aberration in a way that anticipates designs later invented by optical engineers. The use of calcite had advantages. It's hard and durable, resistant to scratching and abrasion. But it also meant trilobite eyes were not adjustable, couldn't change focus or aperture like modern eyes. Different trilobite species had different eye designs suited to their lifestyles. Some had large eyes with many lenses, suitable for clear, well-lit waters. Others had smaller eyes or even no eyes at all, adapted for life in dark or murky environments. The sophistication of trilobite eyes, evolving over 500 million years ago, shows that complex vision appeared very early in animal evolution and that even ancient organisms could have highly refined sensory systems. Burgess Shale fossils reveal Cambrian oddities. The Burgess Shale, a fossil deposit in the Canadian Rockies, is one of the most important paleontological sites in the world. Discovered in 1909, it contains exceptionally preserved fossils from the Middle Cambrian period, about 508 million years ago. Unlike most fossil sites where only hard parts like shells and bones are preserved, the Burgess Shale contains soft-bodied organisms preserved in fine detail, including muscles, guts, eyes, and even gut contents. This exceptional preservation occurred because organisms were buried rapidly in oxygen-poor conditions that prevented decay. The Burgess Shale fauna is remarkable for its diversity and strangeness. Many of the organisms don't fit into any modern group and represent experiments in body plans that didn't persist. Anomalocaris was a large predator, up to a meter long, with compound eyes, grasping appendages, and a circular mouth. Opabenia had 5 eyes and a flexible proboscis with a claw at the end. Hallucigenia was covered in spines and walked on pairs of legs, and for years, scientists couldn't even determine which end was the head. These bizarre creatures show that the Cambrian explosion was not just an increase in diversity, but an explosion of morphological experimentation, with many different body plans being tested. Most of these experiments didn't survive, but a few lineages, including the ancestors of arthropods, chordates, and mollusks, persisted and diversified. The Burgess Shale gives us a glimpse of this crucial period in animal evolution, showing a world utterly different from today, yet containing the roots of modern biodiversity. The earliest vertebrates were jawless fish. Our own lineage, the vertebrates, began in the Cambrian seas with small jawless fish. These early vertebrates had notochords, flexible rods of cartilage running along their backs, which in later vertebrates would evolve into the vertebral column. They lacked paired fins and jaws, feeding by filter feeding or sucking up organic matter from the seafloor. Fossil evidence includes Hycoichthyes and Milocunmingia from the Cambrian of China, tiny fish-like creatures just a few centimeters long. By the Ordovician and Silurian periods, jawless fish had diversified into many forms, covered in bony armor for protection. These armored fish, called ostracoderms, dominated early Paleozoic seas. Today, only two groups of jawless fish survive, lampreys and hagfish, both of which are considered primitive in many respects, though they have also evolved specialized features. The evolution of jaws was a crucial innovation that occurred in the Silurian period, about 430 million years ago. Jaws allowed fish to bite, chew, and grasp prey, opening new feeding strategies. Jawed fish quickly diversified and came to dominate, and by the Devonian, the age of fishes, they had evolved into countless forms, many of which would be unrecognizable today. All modern jawed vertebrates, from sharks to humans, trace our ancestry back to those early jawed fish. Placoderms were the first jawed fish, and some grew enormous. Placoderms were a group of armored, jawed fish that dominated Devonian seas from about 430 to 360 million years ago. They had bony plates covering their heads and the front portions of their bodies, with jointed armor that allowed movement. Placoderms were diverse, including bottom dwellers, active swimmers, and fearsome predators. The most famous placoder is Dunkleosteus, a massive predator that could reach lengths of 10 meters. Instead of teeth, Dunkleosteus had sharp, bony plates that formed a beak-like structure capable of delivering one of the most powerful bites of any animal. Estimates suggest its bite force was comparable to modern crocodiles, or even greater. Dunkleosteus and other large placoderms were apex predators of Devonian seas, feeding on fish, sharks, and even other placoderms. Despite their success, placoderms went extinct at the end of the Devonian in a mass extinction event. Their ecological roles were taken over by sharks and bony fish, which have persisted to the present day. Placoderms represent an entire class of vertebrates that no longer exists, a reminder that even dominant groups can disappear. But their legacy lives on in the jawed vertebrates that followed, as they pioneered the body plan and feeding strategies that jawed fish would continue to refine. Ancient sharks looked very different from modern ones. Sharks have an ancient lineage, first appearing over 400 million years ago in the Silurian period, but early sharks looked quite different from the streamlined predators we're familiar with today. Some early sharks had elaborate spines and bizarre body shapes. Stethocyanthus had a strange anvil-shaped spine on its back, covered in tooth-like denticles, possibly used in mating displays. Helicoprion had a spiral arrangement of teeth called a tooth whorl, which grew in a coil and may have been used to slash at prey. Xenocanthus was a freshwater shark with an elongated body and a spine projecting from the back of its head. These strange forms show that early shark evolution was a time of experimentation. Modern shark forms, with their streamlined bodies, multiple rows of replaceable teeth, and efficient swimming, evolved more recently, though the basic cartilaginous skeleton and predatory lifestyle have characterized sharks throughout their history. Sharks survived multiple mass extinctions and continue to thrive today, making them one of the most successful vertebrate groups. They're often called living fossils, though this term is somewhat misleading because modern sharks have continued to evolve and are quite different from their ancient ancestors in many respects. Nevertheless, sharks provide a living link to the Paleozoic seas, a lineage that has persisted through countless changes in ocean chemistry, temperature, and ecology. The Tethys Ocean separated continents for hundreds of millions of years. Throughout much of the Mesozoic and into the Cenozoic, a vast ocean called the Tethys Sea separated the northern continents, Laurasia, from the southern continents, Gondwana. The Tethys was warm, tropical, and teeming with life. Coral reefs flourished, and diverse marine reptiles, fish, and invertebrates inhabited its waters. As the continents drifted, the Tethys gradually closed. When India collided with Asia, the Tethys Ocean between them disappeared. Its seafloor crumpled and lifted to form the Himalayas. Today, small remnants of the Tethys remain as the Mediterranean Sea, Black Sea, and Caspian Sea. The closure of the Tethys had significant effects on climate and ocean circulation. It altered global current patterns and may have contributed to climate changes during the Cenozoic. The Tethys also left a geological legacy in the form of marine sediments now exposed in mountain ranges, including the Alps and Himalayas, where you can find fossils of ancient marine life at high elevations, testament to the former presence of a tropical sea. The story of the Tethys is a reminder of how dramatically Earth's geography has changed and how oceans, seemingly permanent features, can open and close over geological time. And now, as we reach the end of our journey through deep time, let yourself slowly return to the present. We've traveled billions of years from Earth's molten birth to the ice ages that shaped the world humans inherited. We've witnessed continents colliding and separating, oceans opening and closing, life appearing and transforming the entire planet. We've seen species rise to dominance and then vanish, mountains growing and eroding away, climates swinging from hothouse to icehouse and back again. The story of ancient Earth is not just a story of rocks and fossils. It's a story of change, patience, and resilience. It's a story that puts our own brief existence into perspective. Humans have been around for perhaps 300,000 years, a fraction of a percent of Earth's history. Recorded civilization spans only about 5,000 years, a mere instant in geological time. Yet, in that instant, we've become a force capable of altering the planet's trajectory, for better or worse. Understanding Earth's deep past gives us context for the present and guidance for the future. It shows us that climate has always changed, but also that rapid changes can have catastrophic effects. It reveals that mass extinctions are real and devastating, taking millions of years for recovery. It demonstrates that life is resilient and creative, finding ways to survive and thrive even in the most extreme conditions. It reminds us that the Earth is ancient, patient, and will persist long after we're gone, but that the world we leave for future generations depends on choices we make today. As you rest tonight, the ancient Earth continues its slow transformations. Continents drift a few centimeters, carrying us all along for the ride. Mountains rise grain by grain, worn down by wind and rain. Deep beneath the surface, rock melts and flows, the planet's heat engine driving processes that reshape the surface. Fossils lie buried in stone, waiting perhaps millions of years more before erosion or chance exposes them to light again. And somewhere, life continues to evolve, adapting to whatever conditions the future holds, writing new chapters in a story that has been unfolding for billions of years. You are part of this story. The atoms in your body were forged in ancient stars and assembled on this planet through billions of years of geological and biological processes. The oxygen you breathe was produced by organisms that transformed Earth's atmosphere. The food you eat grows in soil made from weathered rock and decomposed life. You are, in a very real sense, a temporary arrangement of ancient matter, conscious and aware, able to look back through time and understand, at least in part, the vast history that led to this moment. Thank you for journeying through deep time with me tonight. I hope you've found some wonder here, some peace in the immensity of Earth's story, some comfort in knowing that we're part of something far larger and older than ourselves. May your dreams be deep and ancient, like the planet itself, layered with forgotten memories and patient wisdom. Sleep well, traveler through time, and good night.